For 40 days and 40 nights, Jesus went into the wilderness where he met the devil, darkness. Moses wandered in the wilderness for 40 days, and Buddha was in his wilderness for 40 days. Beginning in March of 2025, we were going to have Venus go into retrograde. Every 2 years, she appears to be moving backwards for 40 days and 40 nights. Last time it was in Leo. It was the summer of Barbie. This year, it's in Aries. Venus is the actress. Venus, as we know her, is a perfect beauty, a flower, a five-pointed star. Her pattern, when you look it up, is that of a rose. So much so that through history, she's been known as the rose. She's the evening star and the morning star. She changes from the evening to the morning star. And it is in the middle of this retrograde for 3 days and 3 nights. She disappears and then returns during her phase change. These retrograde periods, like Mercury retrograde or Mars retrograde, they are a time for the death and for the renewal and for that which is no longer serving us to expire. And for Venus, we know her as the beautiful, kind, value-oriented energy. This is the time for us to move from the sanitized version of her to the unsanitized version. We have a passage from the Bible. It speaks to this. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored bright beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. From a revelation. We all have this time for an apocalypse. All have this time for a revelation. It's our own internal revelation. It's not a pretty version. You can't dress for it. It's raw. It's not here to satiate or to placate. We're not here to be the hero. We're not here to solve. We're not here to resolve. This is a dissolving. It brings us to a place of our authenticity, a rawness, something that's in you, something that's in me. It's not clear. Maybe in the past or the future. It's beyond the ripe. It's not linear. It's what holds us when we can find it and when we can find our way through it. It's not out there in the world. It's something that can hold our fear. It's a compassion and a heart space that opens us and broadens us, and we find our place in it. It's a place of service and devotion, not to anyone out there, but to that gentle, that small, that sensitive, that raw, that vulnerable part of ourself. It's something beyond the ravenous and the studied. It's something that is the opposite of how we think of Venus or Aries. It eats itself. It's an Ouroboros. It's an inner technology that's far superior to any other technology. A technology that knows everything, is always beyond, and yet it's in service of this expansion and this growth that is ours. It's a relationship that dissolves and then comes back. It's a relationship that appears to move backward, but then comes back around at a higher elevation. If we don't know it, and if we don't know this dark, and we don't mingle with it and sit with it, and we are afraid of it, and we keep it at bay, then we are ruled by this fear. The feminine, the Venus, until it sits with her fear, will always externalize her masculine to the world outside. And it's here in a Venus retrograde in Aries that she can claim Aries as her own, that she can sit and hold herself in the depths of her fear. And it's for him to sit and hold the parts of himself, his darkness. It's the parts of him that he doesn't want to sit with, that he's afraid of. We cannot be fully in our feminine, a man in his feminine, or a female in her feminine, until there is a manifestation, a form within us that we can sit with. This dynamic form within us. This is the way shower. This is the grail. Throughout history, there have been stories of a grail, a holy grail, of a cup, of an elixir, the sword and the stone, a compass, a rose. This was a symbol of the grail. It is the feminine. It is womanhood that is the ultimate guiding force. And every month, we have an opportunity as women to go through a process of renewal. For me, as a man, born a man, it is when I tap into a monthly cycle of the moon and find opportunities for my own death, my own ego death, my own letting go, that I can hold myself, that I can sit with vulnerable parts of myself. As we move into this Venus, into a new place in Aries and new degree points, it also takes Venus into Pisces and an energy of dissolving. This asks us to look at the part of Venus that's been an actress playing a role, the feminine, the beauty, the fertile, the diplomat, the charming. This Venus that's been a symbol, that we see it as a mirror, asking her to be less the mirror and more the Ouroboros, the alchemical snake, the cycles, eating itself, the intersection of heaven on earth across the feminine and the masculine, holding time and eternity. Half of the astrological signs are feminine, half are masculine, half are yin, half are yang. We are both. We are whole in this. We have access to all of this. We cannot be only one side. This is what Venus in retrograde in Aries is asking of us. In the ancient world, there are stories that spoke of the myths. The myths were stories that held the energy of the planets. One of the first stories written down in southern Iraq is the story of Inanna. It is the story of the flower's perfect journey, the star, the perfect pentagram that is Venus. It's a story that broadens our understanding of this Venus. She moves from the perfect relationship, the perfect love, the perfect beauty, all what we think we want, and very much the epitome of what we've been told to be Inanna, the queen of heaven, queen here on earth. She had achieved fame and money and wealth and children, and prosperity, and everything that she could want, and all of it with the perfect mate. And yet, here she was, restless, being called by a whisper. And one day, she listens. It is her sister, Aerosha, the queen of darkness, beckons her forth. Inanna, compelled, goes to the underworld. She goes and sees and learns and has an experience. It's an experience of her unconscious. It is an experience of the disassociated parts of herself, the parts she does not know. As she prepares for this journey, she adorns herself with the symbols of power, her crown, her jewelry, the finest of jewelry, a breastplate. Like Wonder Woman, a warrior of beauty holding it together in power and symbolism. She's married. Inanna insists to go alone, and yet her loyal servant does not want her to go. And as a compromise, Inanna tells Nishtabar to raise an alarm if she does not return in 3 days. As Inanna goes down through the 7 gates, at each gate, she must surrender something to the underworld. Upon the first gate or threshold, she surrenders her crown, her status, her power. In her second gate, she surrenders her bracelet, her symbol of wealth and connection. It is in her third gate that she surrenders her necklace, her pride, her adornment. And her fourth gate, it's her attachments and her rings. And in the fifth gate, her breastplate, her protection is sacrificed. And then lastly, in the sixth gate, her robe, her last defense, is stripped. And she is walking alone, naked. Her sister sees her and greets her, but instead of a warm greeting, her eyes are of death, and she banishes her where she is strung to a hook to die for 3 days in the heart of the underworld. And Nishabar, who was instructed by Inanna, if she were not to return, does in fact seek out the assistance of her elders. And they have come down to help, and they have descended to the underworld and find Inanna lifeless. They attempt to revive her, but fail. Watching silently, finally, her sister intervenes, and they grant Inanna the water of life, and they resurrect her. However, as she goes back, she must reevaluate every item that she had, and she chooses to leave them all behind. She comes up naked, bare, raw, vulnerable, but this time humbled, wiser, stronger. There's one more thing she must let go of. She must let go of her status as the queen, wife of the king. The woman who has entered the underworld has died, but a new Inanna is born. Raw, spared, she gains. She becomes her own goddess, god, no longer sanitized, no longer satiated by one, no longer tolerant of anything that holds her or limits her or keeps her in her place of behaving. This is the Venus and the Aries that's not demure. This is a Venus and an Aries that finds its perfection in the fullness of her expression, a fullness that is embodied and that no longer is there to fawn or to placate, but it is not here neither to destroy indiscriminately. It is to surrender to being alive, to surrender to the fullness of responding and living and not being trampled, not being varnished. It is the patina of the Venus that is enthralled, humbled, surrendered, holding contradictions, holding opposites, holding the chaotic bliss, holding chaos and order, and it's ever finding bliss. This is a Venus that is a guide bringing us back to our true north, to our sensitivities and our feelings and our energies and what they become our pleasure. What if our grief becomes pleasurable? What if our death becomes pleasurable? What if in the moving and in the wailing and the holding we find our body, we reclaim ourselves in its rawness and the uncleanliness of it all? We must move beyond this. It must be held in this. There is the container for this to be. So it is. Mars and Aries, yes. And also, there's an eclipse in Aries coming during this, and a Mercury retrograde, all of which is having us relook, reconstitute, renovate, revolutionize. And it's not a time for us to work with another until we have found the justice in our own body, and we have found the justice and the revolution that is inside of us. The revolution being to start and take care of the parts of us that are most sensitive, that are most dear, the relationship that we have with ourself, with herself, with the raw part of us, with the vulnerable part of us, with the unloved, the worthless part of us, until we can be with this worthless part of us, the part that feels weak, the part that is the more vulnerable, the feminine, and love her and sit with her and hold her. That is the betrayed feminine inside of us. That is what Venus in retrograde in Aries is about. The masculine inside of us, holding us, comforting us, sitting with us. Until it does that, until it dies as it was, and can come back and hold and see ourselves as an energy complete that's protecting itself from the embarrassment and the shame and the fear of being seen in this. The fear of the betrayed feminine is real. It is death. The fear within the masculine, the shame of betraying, the shame and the embarrassment that we would find out that we have been weak in our duty. The feminine knows this weakness and thus is afraid. The feminine is real and tangible. She requires a holding, her own relationship with the masculine, to hold, to feel safe in her skin and in her body. She has outsourced her pleasure. She has given away her structure. She has outsourced her body to please and to placate and to get, to receive love, to receive something. And in the end, there is no point but to dissolve into a new space, a woman that is fully here in earth, in her body, as a vessel of earth's pleasure sensors, of earth's genitals, as earth's sensitive space, to feel this space and this unearthed, untrammeled, and untempered, and untampered by the insensitive. How it appears to others is not the point. It is the purity and the rawness of the space that is yours. It is yours to hold. This is what it is to be fully in the feminine, owning that. Man, myself, I too have to hold myself here. The masculine Aries has to go through my own death process while I'm alive and die to my ego that holds the feminine back from her expansion. This is the death and the rebirth. This is the poorest part of it, bringing the shamanic back to our bodies, to our sex. The divine sexual and the shamanic must be reunited, the inner and the outer, the masculine and the feminine coming back whole. It's a wholeness. There's no better or more, higher or lower. This is equal and whole. Polarity is not hierarchy. Polarity is not hierarchy. One is not better than the other. This is Inanna, this Venus retrograde with an eclipse in the middle of it. Go find the myths of the underworld. Go find the darkness. Go live your myth. Go find your own story of Inanna. No longer are we Venus alone. Instead, we are Lilith. We are Vesta, Pallas, Athena, Juno, and Ceres. The sacred geometry of time is what this Venus retrograde speaks to. Go see this perfect pentagram that is the Venus journey that she creates. You are enough. You are enough, she says in her perfection. For your perfection lies in the inside. The perfection that we seek on the outside will never be satiated or solved. It is a perfection that we can feel and express and hear and only dissolve into and enjoy, ultimately, this sacred space of dissolving. In many of these early stories, there were two goddesses. There was the goddess of fertility, love, beauty, and relationships. And there was also the goddess of the underworld, or the unconscious, the disassociated parts, the black moon Lilith, the asteroid goddesses. This Venus retrograde is an opportunity for us not to separate these anymore, but to bring these together into our wholeness, into one Venusian energy, to awaken our divine. We must awaken to the disassociated, to the dark, to the unconscious. And the story of Inanna, Inanna provides a myth in many ways of mirrors. It's a story of Venus during this period. It's a powerful, temperamental, voracious Inanna, erotic and explicit. In many ways, she is the great whore in the book of Revelations, the Babylonian goddess of Ishtar, Revelation 17. And this story of the dance of the seven veils, of the descent into the underworld from Inanna. She has this seven disrobings, and she dies to herself and to her energies. So always look at this Aries energy to host her in her descent. The masculine energy, instead of being the dominant energy, must now be the energy of the host. In order for us to know the perfection of life, we must also know its imperfection. In order for us to wake up, we must know the sleeping or the unconscious. We need more stories of Venus, the feminine. Venus, the evening star, the cycle of Venus disappearing in many ways mirrors that of the moon, the new moon. We have an access to this cycle every month. It is the snake that eats its tail, the circle. This is Venus retrograde. What is it to eat our own tail? We cannot just expanding and expanding and expanding without also contracting. This is the lesson of the Venus retrograde. This is what we must go and sacrifice. We cannot hold the masculine and ask it to sacrifice itself and to die without we as well sacrificing that which we hold and claim dear to us. The structures, the powers, the feminine veil, and then coming back into our wholeness, bringing all of us back together, the parts that we were most afraid of, to be married to ourselves. It is in this body of ours, it is the knowingness that is the feminine energy of the Venus retrograde in Aries, as we reclaim the way we look, the way we are, and the way we feel as ours. You cannot get it from somewhere else or something else. You cannot give to get. I can no longer give to get. I can no longer express to get. I can no longer be something for the satisfaction of someone else. I must be my own embodied space of safety and love. No longer can we be the sanitized Venus.